He said I was nothing. Just like that. No emotion in his voice. No hesitation. I still remember the way he looked at me, like I was invisible. Like all the love, all the time, all the late-night talks, meant absolutely nothing. Back then, I believed every word he said. I believed I wasn't good enough. Not pretty enough. Not smart enough. Just not enough. I had dreams, of course. We all do. But when someone you care about looks you in the eye and tells you that your dreams are too big for someone like you, it sticks. It hurts in a way that's hard to explain. He used to laugh when I talked about my goals. He thought it was cute at first, like I was a child playing pretend. But the more serious I got, the colder he became. "You'll never make it," he told me once. "You should be realistic." And for a while, I tried to be. I stopped talking about the things I loved. I stopped chasing what made me feel alive. I shrank myself to fit into the tiny space he allowed me to occupy. It's strange how fast someone can go from being your whole world to becoming the person who tears it down. He started pointing out my flaws like it was a daily routine. My clothes weren't stylish enough. My voice wasn't sweet enough. My plans, just fantasies. But I held on. I kept hoping he would change. That maybe one day he would see me the way I saw him, with love, with admiration, with hope. That day never came. Instead, he left. Quietly. Like I was just a phase. A passing moment in his life that no longer served him. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there. Frozen. The silence in the room was loud. Heavier than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was something deeper. Like someone had reached inside me and turned off the light. People say time heals everything. But in that moment, time felt like the enemy. Every second dragged. Every hour reminded me of how empty I felt. But maybe something else was beginning. Something small. Quiet. A spark. And I didn't even see it yet. We met when I was still learning how to love myself. I wasn't looking for anyone. I wasn't chasing romance. But he came into my life like a wave, fast, unexpected, and full of promises. At first, he made me feel seen. Like I mattered. Like maybe I wasn't as invisible as I thought. He listened to my stories. Laughed at my jokes, held my hand like it meant something, and in those early days, I believed we had something real. He would say things like, "You're different," or "I've never met anyone like you." And I believed him. Because when you've spent your whole life feeling like you're in the background, even the smallest attention feels like the spotlight. He told me I was special, that he liked how I thought, how I dreamed, how I always saw the good in people. But slowly, that warmth started to fade. He began to withdraw. One missed text turned into a day of silence. The excitement in his voice turned into boredom. The compliments turned into criticisms. Little things I did started to annoy him. If I laughed too loudly, he said I was being childish. If I spoke about my goals, he said I was being unrealistic again. And when I tried to share how I felt, he told me I was too emotional. So I learned to stay quiet, to keep my feelings tucked away like they didn't matter. I started second-guessing everything. Was I too much? Was I too needy? Too ambitious? I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. He hadn't just become distant. He became a reminder of everything I wasn't. Still, I stayed. Because part of me thought love was supposed to hurt sometimes. That maybe I was the problem. That if I tried harder, if I just proved myself more, he'd come back. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. He began comparing me to others. "Why can't you be more like her?" he once said, pointing out someone he barely knew. And that hurt more than anything. Because it wasn't just that he didn't love me anymore, it was that he didn't even see me anymore. Just a shadow of the girl he once wanted. But I kept holding on, hoping for a change, praying for a sign. All I wanted was to feel like I mattered again. But instead, he kept pulling away, little by little, until there was nothing left to hold. I was standing alone, holding the memory of someone who had already let go. The day he left, he didn't even look back. No long goodbye. No explanations. Just silence. It felt like I had been erased. Like everything we shared meant nothing at all. I remember sitting on the floor, staring at the door he walked out of, hoping, just for a second, that he would come back. That maybe it was a mistake. That maybe he would realize he was wrong. But he didn't. And I didn't move. Not for a long time. It's strange how someone can be such a big part of your world, and then, in a moment, they're gone. And what's left behind is just emptiness. I stopped talking to people. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want the sympathy. I didn't want the questions. All I wanted was to disappear. I stopped doing the things I used to love. Music didn't sound the same. Food didn't taste the same. Time passed, but I wasn't really living. I felt like a ghost. I went through the motions, woke up, pretended to function, went to sleep. Over and over. And at night, when the world was quiet, the thoughts got louder. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really wasn't good enough. Maybe I really was nothing. Those words echoed in my mind over and over, like a broken record. And the worst part? I believed them. I believed that no one would ever see value in me again. That I had nothing to offer. That love, success, happiness, those were things meant for other people. Not for someone like me. I deleted old photos. Unfollowed people. Tried to erase anything that reminded me of him or the life I thought we'd have. But pain doesn't disappear just because you pretend it's not there. It lingers. And it shows up in the smallest ways. Like the silence after your phone doesn't buzz. Or the way your chest feels heavy when you see couples laughing. Or how your smile feels fake when people ask, "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. But I lied. Because that was easier than opening up. Easier than admitting that someone had taken a piece of me I didn't know how to get back. Some nights, I cried myself to sleep. Other nights, I just stared at the ceiling, numb. I wondered if he ever thought about me. If he missed me. If he cared. If he ever regretted leaving. But I never got any answers. Just silence. And in that silence, something started to shift. Not all at once. Not loudly. Just quietly. Like a whisper. A tiny thought. What if this isn't the end? I didn't wake up one day suddenly feeling strong. There was no dramatic moment, no flash of inspiration. Just small steps. Quiet decisions. The first one? Getting out of bed. It sounds simple, but that morning, it felt like climbing a mountain. I told myself, just stand up. That's all. Nothing more. And I did. Then I made coffee. Not because I wanted it, but because it gave me a reason to move. Little things like that started to become my survival. A shower. A short walk. Cleaning my room. Each action was a fight against the weight I carried. But each time I did something, even something small, it gave me a little bit of power back. Some days I slipped. There were still tears. Still moments when I'd hear his words in my head and feel like giving up. But those voices got quieter the more I kept moving. I started writing in a journal. Not pretty poems or positive quotes. Just raw thoughts. Pain. Anger. Hope. Confusion. It helped. I began to remember the parts of myself I had hidden away. The parts one buried to make space for him. My love for stories. My silly sense of humor. My curiosity. My voice. For so long, I'd been told I was too much, so I made myself small. But slowly I began to wonder, what if I wasn't too much? What if I was just right for something bigger? I started reading again. Books I loved. Stories of people who rose after falling. They made me feel less alone. I listened to music that made me feel something. Not just sad songs, but powerful ones. Songs that reminded me I still had life in me. Then, one day, I opened my laptop. Not to scroll or hide from the world, but to begin again. I looked up courses, jobs, opportunities, and I signed up for one. It was scary. My hands were shaking when I hit submit. But that fear, it felt better than the emptiness. It meant I was trying. I started to feel proud of the small things. Finishing a task, saying no, speaking up, and people noticed. Friends I hadn't heard from in a while said, "You look different." I didn't look different. I felt different. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving just to make it through the day. I was building something. Something for me. And every time I chose myself, I became a little stronger. He had left thinking I was nothing, but I was just getting started. I started saying yes to things I used to be afraid of. Not because I suddenly had it all figured out, but because staying stuck scared me more. I applied for a job I didn't think I'd get, and I got it. I was nervous, unsure, constantly questioning myself, but I showed up anyway. Day by day, I learned. I messed up. I improved. I asked questions. I stayed late. I worked harder than I ever had before. Not to prove something to him. Not anymore. But to prove something to myself. That I could do it. That I was capable. That the person he left behind was stronger than he ever imagined. The first time someone praised my work, I didn't know how to react. I almost brushed it off, because I wasn't used to being seen that way. But slowly, I let those words sink in. Maybe I was good. Maybe I belonged. People started to notice, not just what I did, but who I was becoming. Confident, focused, resilient. I found myself in rooms I never thought I'd enter. Meetings with people I used to admire from a distance. Projects that scared me, but excited me even more. I kept pushing, even when it was hard. Even when my hands trembled and my voice shook. Because every time I stepped forward, I left behind the version of me who thought she couldn't. And then something happened. An opportunity. A message in my inbox that didn't feel real. It was from a producer. They'd seen my work. They wanted to feature me. On TV. I read that email 3 times, just to be sure. I thought of how far I'd come. From crying on the floor to standing in front of cameras. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about being seen by the world. It was about that girl he walked away from, the one he said would never be enough. She was about to tell her story. I walked into that studio with my heart racing, not out of fear, but because I was alive. I sat under the lights. I looked at the camera, and I spoke. Not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been told they can't. Who's ever been made to feel small. And somewhere out there, he saw it. I didn't need him to. But he did. And maybe, just for a second, he realized what he lost. But this story was never about him. It was always about who I became after he left. The messages started coming in right after the interview aired. Old classmates, distant relatives, people I hadn't heard from in years. They all said the same thing. Asterisk, I saw you on TV. Asterisk. Some were surprised. Some were proud. Some just curious. But one message stood out. It was from him. Just a short text. No greeting. No apology. Just, asterisk, I saw your interview. You look different. Asterisk. I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There were no butterflies. Just calm. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I had nothing left to say. He was a chapter I'd already closed. Back then, I used to imagine this moment. I thought it would feel like victory, like finally getting the last word. But it didn't. It felt peaceful, like I had outgrown the pain, like I didn't need him to see me anymore. I had already seen myself. And that was enough. I kept moving forward. New opportunities opened. More interviews. More recognition. But none of it felt like a performance. It felt like alignment. Like I was finally doing what I was meant to do. Not to prove a point. Not to chase anyone's approval. But because it made me feel alive. I started mentoring others. People who had been broken, lost, overlooked. I told them what I wish someone had told me. That being left behind doesn't mean you're unworthy. It just means your story's not over. Every time I shared that message, I felt stronger. Not because I had all the answers, but because I had walked through the fire and come out whole. He continued watching from afar. I knew because he kept viewing my stories, liking old posts, showing up in quiet ways. But the girl he left, she wasn't looking back. She had transformed. And the life she was living now? It was filled with purpose, with people who saw her, with work that mattered. She had created her own light, one he could never dim again. And maybe he watched, wondering what could have been. But she didn't wonder. She knew. She knew that everything she became happened because she chose to rise. Not once. Not in a big, dramatic moment. But every single day. In every small step. In every quiet decision to keep going. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. And now, as her voice echoed through screens, reaching people across the world, there was no bitterness. Just power. Because the truth is, you don't need to be seen by the ones who left you. You just need to see yourself. I used to think closure came from the person who hurt you. That one day, they'd come back with answers. With regret. Maybe even an apology. But that day never came. And still, I healed. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But slowly and completely. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some days I laughed. Others, I cried for no reason. Some days I felt powerful. Others, I doubted everything all over again. But the difference was, I kept going. Even on the hardest days, I reminded myself that the past didn't define me. I wasn't the same girl he left behind. I had become someone new. Someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded. There was a time I thought love had to come from someone else, that I had to be chosen to feel whole. But now I know better. I chose me. I showed up for myself when no one else did. And in that choice, I found a kind of peace I never knew existed. The success, the spotlight, the recognition, it all felt good. But it wasn't what healed me. What truly changed me was learning to trust myself again, to look in the mirror and see someone worthy. Worthy of love, of respect, of joy. I began to create new dreams, ones that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone. Dreams that came from who I really was, not who I thought I had to be. I started building a life filled with meaning, new friendships, new goals, new memories that had nothing to do with him. People entered my life who saw me, not for what I could give them, but for who I was. They didn't ask me to shrink. They didn't compare me to anyone else. They just listened, supported, believed in me. And that's when I knew this was what love was supposed to feel like. Safe, calm, free. I still think about the girl I used to be. The one who begged for crumbs of attention. The one who twisted herself into shapes just to be accepted. I wish I could hug her. Tell her she was never the problem. That her softness was strength. That her voice mattered. That being left was painful, yes, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of becoming someone real. Someone unshakable. And now, when I speak to others, when I share my journey, I don't speak from bitterness. I speak from love. Because I know what it's like to be broken. But I also know what it's like to rise. And maybe someone out there needs to hear that today. That even if they feel invisible now, even if they were made to feel like nothing, there's still a fire inside them, waiting to be seen. I didn't recognize the version of me I had become until I looked back one day. Not in sadness, not in pain, but in awe. Because the journey, the heartbreak, the silence, the starting over, it had shaped me. I used to wonder why it had to happen the way it did. Why he walked away. Why I had to fall so hard just to learn how to stand again. But some answers come quietly. Not in words, but in the way you grow. And when I finally saw myself as I am now, I didn't see the girl who was left. I saw a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. One who didn't wait for someone to choose her. One who didn't need to be rescued. There were still moments that felt tender. Like when I passed places we once visited. Or when I heard a song that used to play in the background of our story. But the difference was, those moments no longer held power over me. They were just memories. Nothing more. And I no longer belonged to them. Because I had created new memories. Better ones. Filled with laughter that was real, not forced. With people who clapped when I won, and stayed when I lost. The kind of people who didn't leave when things got hard. People who didn't need me to be perfect to love me. And most importantly, I had become one of those people for myself. I started celebrating the small wins. A quiet morning. A finished project. A night of peaceful sleep. I didn't need loud applause to feel proud. My joy wasn't borrowed anymore. It was mine. And sometimes, I'd scroll back through my old photos. Not to feel sad, but to remember how far I'd come. The girl with tired eyes. The girl pretending to be okay. She didn't know what was ahead. But she kept going anyway. That's what made her brave. Not the fact that she survived heartbreak, but the fact that she kept choosing to heal. Even when no one was watching. Especially then. Because healing isn't about making sure everyone sees your comeback. It's about making sure you believe in it. And now, when someone asks me what changed, I tell them it wasn't just one moment. It was every tear I wiped on my own. Every time I stood up after falling. Every no I said when I used to say yes, just to be liked. Every truth I spoke, even when my voice shook. That's what changed me. Not the pain itself, but what I did with it. How I turned it into power. And if I could do that, maybe someone else out there can too.